1-800.
All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Concerns are mounting over Quebec's new integration bill, Bill 84. You heard it in Don Kagan-Fleming's newscast. And groups representing English-speaking and immigrant communities are voicing their opposition. The bill, it aims to replace not replace, because in Quebec for 50 years now, we've had interculturalism as our official model, not the Canadian version of multiculturalism. But it makes to officialize that. That's what the bill does. It officializes that interculturalism model, and it would require newcomers to adopt values such as secularism and gender equality. Let's speak to the Quebec Community Groups Network now. We head over to Sylvia Martin-Laforge, the Director General of the group. She's on the line. Sylvia, welcome back to the program.
Good morning.
So let me ask, from your perspective, from the Quebec Community Groups Network, what are the issues you see with Bill 84?
So the bill is it's a fundamental shift in how Quebec defines identity, belonging, and rights. It's really not just another law. And what's interesting here is that in that last week of parliamentary hearings, many people, individuals and organizations, agreed that they didn't like the bill for the same reasons as the QCGN doesn't like the bill. If it's passed without changes, for sure, it could sideline English-speaking Quebecers and other minority communities. Tying the government support to an undefined cultural model, and I think that's of interest to everybody, weakening protection for fundamental rights.
So how would it do that? Tell me how this bill would do what you say. How would it erode the Anglophone community or other cultural communities?
So this bill, along with Bill 21 and Bill 96, would trump, sorry for that word right now, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That means that it puts the French language and Quebec identity above basic rights and freedoms, and that's a worry for any Quebecer. This bill, for example, talks about gender equality, but it doesn't talk about all the other fundamental rights, right to religion, right to expression. The bill is certainly very flawed.
So, I think people who are proponents of the bill would say that, Quebec is a modern secular society, and when newcomers come here, they just want those newcomers to know about values that Quebecers hold near and dear, whether it's secularism or whether it's gender equality. What do you view as the negative to when someone comes to Quebec, or when someone comes to Canada for that matter, if Canada wanted to try to do something like that, to tell people, hey, this is our culture. We take some things that are some values very close to our hearts. What do you what do you see as is it the message that they're passing? Because it certainly seems like if it was different, if they didn't include language, maybe we'd be having a different discussion this morning.
So, Elias, c'est le moyen. It's the coercive measure. Uh-huh. It really is a coercive measure. It risks sidelining minorities by narrowing the definition of Quebec identity. And actually, this is not just for newcomers. It could happen. It will affect, if it passes the way it looks right now. Mm-hmm. It would affect first and second generations of Quebecers, because it's first of all, the law is very vague.
Yeah,
and you can't quite pinpoint what it will do. What it will mean in the implementation. I remind you, a few weeks ago now, even Bill 96, there was a group that wanted to hold a book club, an English group that wanted to, yes. So, and somebody said no. And then we found out that no, Bill 96 doesn't mean that. So when bills are that restrictive, when laws that restrictive, regulations and the implementation becomes problematic, because people really don't quite understand what it means in the everyday.
How do you view it as different? Because Canada has passed a bill, I think it's in 1984, that just said, hey, multiculturalism is the official policy of Canada, And, there's no defined metrics or characteristics, but it just says this is what we do in Canada. We're multicultural. And the Canadian government, when it does other things, should go down the path of multiculturalism. So I kind of view this bill as well, Quebec just officializing what they've done unofficially for the last few decades, which is just saying our model is interculturalism. Do you see it differently?
Well, I see. I understand that Quebec would want a different model. I do understand that. And, some other people might not. But what is problematic here, Elias, is the funding mechanisms that go with this model.
So what are those funding mechanisms?
So, for example, the minister, when he talked about the bill in the beginning, Les Nuits d'Afrique is funded quite a bit by the provincial government. And so people were asking him in the French media, so what percentage of Les Nuits d'Afrique would have to be promoting Quebec culture, whatever that means, to get the funding? What about the Scottish Games in the summer? What about the Irish Parade? So this is not just about new immigrants. This is about culture in Quebec that is a métissage. It's a diversity that has been around for,
So can I be blunt, Sylvia, on this one?
Yes.
Just because just was the Irish Parade, or when this bill came out, people brought up the Greek Parade, and of course both my parents are Greek, so I was like, ooh, Greek Parade, let's talk. And here's the thing: I've been, I go to the St. Patrick's Day Parade, I go to the Greek Parade, I go to these other festivals that are cultural, and what do I see? I see Canadian flags and Quebec flags, and there's French spoken at all of these things, right? And to me, I think this bill is about those communities that when they have their events, no one else is invited. There aren't Canadian flags. There aren't Quebec flags. I think that's who the bill is targeted. Now, maybe language-wise, the bill doesn't say that enough. But that to me, like to say, hey, we cannot continue down a path where certain communities come to Quebec, and when they hold events, it's closed to everyone else. And there is no Quebec pride or Canadian pride. There's no flags to be found. There's no French to be found. I think that's okay.
Well, I think that at the national committee hearings, at the National Assembly hearings, you're hearing some of that, and people are pushing back as to what does it really mean to have a Quebec identity, and a Quebec identity with the Greeks, the Chinese, the Irish, a little bit like the flag of Montreal, right?
Yeah.
We are open to diversity. And this law feels like it is exclusionary, and in terms of what then the civil servants will fund will be problematic to having all of these wonderful events that include everybody.
Do you find what we're talking about here is representative of like growing schisms between Quebec and Canada? Like, it's not lost on me that like the Canadian government, they are legitimately thinking about getting rid of the citizenship ceremony for Canada and letting people do it online. It's a legitimate thought process. We don't even need to do the ceremonies anymore. And here in Quebec, we have like opposition parties asking that we start doing Quebec citizenship ceremonies. And part of me says, you know what the problem is? It's not that Quebec is chiming up for Quebec values, is that there's a void coming from Ottawa about Canadian values. And I think this would be the role for Ottawa. For all those newcomers, you want to stand up for Anglophones in Quebec? Well, when you do a citizenship ceremony, that would be a great point for Ottawa to make. Hey, listen, when you come to Canada, doesn't matter if you're in Quebec or otherwise, we're bilingual, English and French. So like when I look at this story, I actually take my aim at the federal government for not trying to talk about what Canada stands for, because I think that would be the counterbalance for what Quebec wants to do here.
I think that's a terrific point of view, and I think that in the last few weeks, there has been a rise in patriotism and using our flags. I think you've noticed it like everybody else has noticed it.
Yeah.
And I think that this crisis that we're going through right now has raised interest in demonstrating identity, Canadian identity, Quebec identity. I think the two can coexist. I think that legislation perhaps defines it too narrowly sometimes, or we forget what the legislation meant in the first place, like multiculturalism.
Yeah.
But I think that we should do everything we can to ensure that Quebec has that diverse perspective that we've built the province on.
Sylvia, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Sylvia,
bye now.
Bye-bye. That's Sylvia Martin-Laforge, the Director General of the Quebec Community Groups Network.